Joe Biden has had a horrible time trying to get some of his bigger, higher profile appointees through their confirmation hearings unscathed. Now, he's had a few successes, so that should be expected. You usually put people into positions that are non-controversial to kind of get some wins. So most of the people you put in office are gonna just skate right through. It's like, oh, okay, this person's gonna be attorney general. Are they a lawyer? They were attorney general for a state, or like Bill Barr, who I think was attorney general before. Things like that. These are people that generally will skate through. So you do that so that you can get that worked out. However, the high profile ones are not skating through, and they are awful. They are doing terrible in their confirmation hearings. The first one is Xavier Bacerra. Now, Xavier Bacerra, I happen to know a little bit about him. He's the Attorney General of the state of California, the state that I live in. He is a garbage human being. He's just terrible. He's up there. I mean, he's not as bad as Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was my senator for a while. She is a garbage human being. But Xavier Becerra, he is terrible. First of all, he's the Attorney General of California. Now, if if Joe Biden had appointed him to be Attorney General of the U.S., I still wouldn't like it, but that would make more sense. This is a guy who's been Attorney General. He is a lawyer. I mean, he's been the top cop in a state. It would make more sense to go that way. But he's being positioned to be the head of Health and Human Services. He has no qualifications. He's not a doctor. He's not his practice as a lawyer was never in the medical field. And it's just awful. I mean, he has no qualifications whatsoever. And that's been pointed out, that he has no idea what he's going to be doing as Secretary of Health and Human Services. I mean, he will be awful. So there's nothing there. There's no qualifications for this at all. So people will say, oh, well, Ben Carson, Trump chose Ben Carson for housing and urban development. Ben Carson grew up in a ghetto. He grew up poor. He grew up in these HUD, these HUD houses, basically these public housing complexes. He grew up there, so he knows from experience what it's like. So he can go and communicate with people in that situation and find out, hey, what can be done to make this better, and how do we make that work? So, granted, he's a neurosurgeon, so what does he know about housing and housing policy? But from an experience standpoint, he's going to know the general plight of people and know the problems that they're going to see. However, Xavier Becerra has none of that. He has no qualifications whatsoever, and that's been called out several times. He also, his only real, he's just been lambasted for this. I believe Ted Cruz said, hey, besides suing nuns, what do you know about healthcare? Because that's all he's done, is he sued nuns. So because this Catholic charity would not provide birth control for nuns. Yes, that is a legit thing that happened. He sued nuns because they wouldn't provide birth control to nuns. Now, maybe Xavier Becerra thinks that nuns are disingenuous and some of them might get pregnant, but that's not where you start the assumptions for policy. So there's that. On top of that, he has supported abortion stances that are just egregious. And to have somebody with this radical, and I hate using the word radical, how about just atrocious? That's kind of an old-fashioned word. what's a better word? Psychotic version of pro-choice is we can't have that person in charge of our healthcare or health apparatus in the country. That is just awful. Let's just go over a few of them. He supports partial birth abortion. Okay, so he's okay with partly delivering a baby. Remember, a baby that's come to full term and shoving a pair of scissors into its skull. That's what partial birth abortion is. So he's okay with that. He's voted against any kind of restrictions against it. Xavier Bacerra used to be a congressional representative from California, and he voted against any kind of restrictions on partial birth abortion. So that's just awful. Going back to the whole nuns thing, he opposed. Basically, he sued Little Sisters of the Poor because they were not providing birth control to the nuns that worked in the charity. So that's his real claim to fame, is he sued nuns. He has gone after pro-life activists. So there was a case in which there was video footage that showed Planned Parenthood selling the remains of aborted babies. So even though that was against the law in the state of California, rather than try to prosecute the Planned Parenthood clinic, or at least the staff there, he went after the people who discovered it. So basically, he will go after investigative journalists before he'll go after baby murderers. So, I mean, people violating the law after they kill babies. So there's that. He is also, when he was in Congress, he voted down the Hyde Amendment, which is, it's a federal provision that states that Medicare, I think it's Medicare or Medicaid, one of the two, they can't be used for abortions. So basically no public funding, no federal funding to abortions. So the actual abortion is not going to get funds from the federal government. So he said he supports using federal dollars to perform abortions. And, I mean, if you just need to top it all off, he has a perfect rating from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, which is just an abortion mill. It's pretty terrible. So and when he was asked about any of this stuff, he was just terrible. He didn't answer very well. He evaded every question possible. He was terrible in the confirmation hearing. So I hope he gets, I hope Biden has to replace him, because I hope he doesn't get through. He was probably the worst example as far as just, why are you being picked for this? The next problem is actually Dr. Rachel Levine, who's being touted for assistant director of Health and Human Services, so assistant secretary for Health and Human Services. So what a lot of people don't realize is that, you have the big person, the person that is the secretary of these cabinet positions. So Health and Human Services, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, all that. That's all well and good. But the people who really create policy and implement policy, and really they write the regulations and everything like that, they're the assistant secretaries. And sometimes the assistant to the assistant is a big deal as well. Well, Rachel Levine was obviously brought in so that they could do the whole, we hired a trans person, yay! The problem is that you need to go back, and I'm gonna post links in the video descriptions. Go back and watch Rachel Levine's just awkward interchange with Rand Paul, Senator Dr. Rand Paul, or Dr. Senator Rand Paul, whatever. Rand Paul asked her a specific question, and I'll go ahead and say her, if that's what dude wants. I'll go ahead and say her. Now, she said, she was asked a specific question, is should children who have not reached the age of consent be able to change their sex? Is that a decision that we should be allowing for minors? That is a very straightforward question, and she evaded it completely. I think it was like 5 times. He went over and kept asking a different way. Okay, let me try it this way. Let me try it this way. You evaded the question. And she just kept ignoring. This is a problem. Now, if you look online, what you'll see is that Rand Paul is a transphobe, and they'll compare the sex change surgery to circumcision. So, yeah, why can't a child choose their gender? They're the one choosing it. You're okay with circumcision. It's like, well, first of all, if you're comparing, I want you to think about this. A male to female transition, I mean, if you, I mean, that's a lot more mutilation of the genitals by far than a circumcision. That's number one. All right. Number two, I mean, yeah, by far it is. I mean, you're basically at that point you're trying to compare a haircut to a guillotine. I mean, that's really what you're doing. If that's your biggest, thing. It's like, oh yeah, well, what about circumcision? It's like, no, there's the mutilation of the genitals that goes on for a sex change operation is much worse. So there is that. But could not answer, should a minor be doing this? We don't let children choose what school they go to. We don't let children drive. They can't be responsible for those kind of decisions. I mean, I barely let my kids decide what clothes they want to wear. I mean, we're not letting them make these decisions. We have an age of consent. If somebody is too old and they are having sex with somebody who is too young, that's against the law. We have all of that, but we're going to tell somebody who's a 5 or 6 year old, yeah, you can change your gender, even though it flies in the face of biology. It flies in the face of just basic science, and it's a gruesome transition process. You're talking about giving kids puberty blockers so that they can't go through and develop as a person. And not only that, but you're allowing somebody to make this life-altering decision at an age when the statistics show that if you let them go through the whole thing, in most cases, and by most, I mean over 95% of these people, it is an actual phase. They just kind of like, you know what? No, I'm, now that I've kind of hit puberty and I've gone through life, it is what it is. I am a little bit concerned on the trans issue because it reeks of homophobia as well. It's there's something about how I think it's mostly, when I see it, it's mostly from parents when their kids start, their boy starts showing a bit more feminine traits or something like that, or their girl is a bit more tomboyish. And when you talk to parents, or you see parents that go about this, I think there's a little bit of homophobia there, because I think they're wanting their kid to, it's like, well, maybe you're a girl then, maybe, because they don't want to deal with the, what if he's gay? It's like, I would much rather my son be gay than tell him he should chop his dick off. So, there's that. Okay, I would much rather my daughter be a lesbian than for her to completely ruin any chance she has to have kids at a later date, because I let her decide her gender at an age where she had no business, when she basically didn't have any business deciding what she wanted from McDonald's. So the fact that this person can't answer basic medical questions from someone who is a doctor when they're going here, that's that's strike two. I mean, at Health and Human Services for Joe Biden. So those are the two worst ones as far as, you know, how they didn't answer, because they tended to evade. And the three problems that he's having, they all tended to evade. The one that actually is the worst for me out of all of this is actually Joe Biden's pick for Attorney General, is Merrick Garland. Now, if you know who Merrick Garland is, good for you. But if you don't, Merrick Garland was the person that Barack Obama chose to replace Antonin Scalia when Scalia died to replace him on the Supreme Court when Scalia died. And Republicans at the time said, fuck no. We are not letting Barack Obama choose someone to replace Antonin Scalia. Not going to happen. And so they left the seat open for a year until Trump got elected, and then Trump put Neil Gorsuch on the court. So Merrick Garland he's a D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals judge. He's been a judge for a long time. Now he's up for Attorney General, which is fine. On paper, Merrick Garland, when I heard the name, I was like, that's about as good as I can get from a Joe Biden. You know, that's probably as good as I can get as Attorney General. That sounds good to me. He has been awful. Merrick Garland has been terrible in his in his confirmation hearing. He's terrible at this. He stumbles over a lot. He does that a lot. You would think someone with, decades of experience in the public sector, as a judge, as a judge, I believe he worked as a prosecutor in the Justice Department. I mean, he's got a lot of experience, but he fumbles over himself during the hearings. It's really uncomfortable. I mean, honestly, he sounds like me. Now, this guy's in his 70s, I believe. So he should sound like me. He should be more polished. I mean, and I've seen him do like moot court things where he's helping college students tackle a serious case or something like that. He's actually really personable. He seems really nice guy, but he comes off as someone who's trying to hide something. Like he's trying to answer these questions, knowing that if he says what he plans to do as Attorney General, he will lose not just Republican votes, because I don't think Republicans are going to vote for him anyway, but he'll lose those votes, and he might lose some Democrat votes too. So he comes across as a little shady because of how much he stammers and stutters and tries and trips over himself. But he also just gives bad answers. I mean, again, on paper, this was Biden's best pick out of all of his cabinet positions on paper. This guy was a prosecutor. This guy is a judge on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. He was chosen. He was nominated to be on the Supreme Court, never got confirmed. I mean, he on paper is a great pick. Like I said, I thought Joe Biden doing it was genius. I thought it was great. I was like, okay, great. This is about as good as we're going to get from Joe Biden for Attorney General. Perfect. But he was asked, like, he couldn't even answer if coming into the country illegally is against the law. Is it illegal to cross the border illegally? I mean, he evaded that question. I mean, how do you, and his actual words were, Senator, I haven't really thought about it. You've been a fucking federal judge for at least 10 years. I think it's longer. I think it might be like 20 years. You've been a judge for 20 years. You're telling me you've never thought about whether or not an illegal immigrant is breaking the law by being here illegally? You've never considered that at all in your day-to-day life? You've never had a case before you where you've had to make the assumption or make the consideration? He's not in a position to be a judge. If this was a confirmation hearing for him to be on a federal court of appeals, Sure. Yeah, you hem and haw like, oh, I don't really know. I don't want to prejudge. That's great. Dude, you're going to be attorney general. This is finally a time where you can say, oh yeah, it's totally illegal, but whether, how we're going to enforce that's going to be a little bit different under the Biden administration, under my leadership in the Department of Justice than it will be than it would have been on the previous administration. There you go. There's your answer. But no, he had to evade it. Same thing when asked about the Durham investigation. The Durham investigation is an investigation started under Donald Trump, the Trump administration, to find out what happened with the whole Russian collusion hoax. Because we know that Russia collusion was a complete waste of time and a complete farce. And it was started, the whole start of the investigation was based off of phony information that should have never been allowed in the first place. Should have never been used as information to justify warrants. So that is an investigation that is still ongoing, I believe. I think Durham might have resigned because I think he sees the writing on the wall. Merrick Garland was asked, hey, are you going to keep the Durham investigation going? Or are you going to squash it? Wouldn't answer. Evaded that as well. Wouldn't commit to it. And, again, I think it's just because I'm probably going to kill it. He couldn't say that out loud. And then the worst one to me, and this is from a pure policy perspective, Merrick Garland says, when asked, again, I think this is all being asked by Ted Cruz, will the Department of Justice try to overturn the Second Amendment DC versus Heller decision? Will you actively participate in cases that try to overturn the Heller decision, which guarantees a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms? An individual right, anyway. And again, non-committal. Wouldn't say anything. So the answer is yes, then, on that one. You have to assume that. So overall, think of everything I've gone over the last 45 minutes. Joe Biden launches airstrikes. He's killing jobs. The two governors from the most populous liberal states, California and New York, are wrapped up in scandals and problems right now in their states. I mean, you have Cuomo. I mean, even New York Democrats are saying we should impeach him or he needs to resign. There's a recall effort in California. So there's all of that going on. Then on top of that, probably his three most high profile cabinet picks, they all suck. At least at the confirmation hearing portion. They are terrible. So this has been a terrible first 5 weeks or so of the Biden administration. And I really don't know how this is going to go going forward. So I'll probably go over, I know today is the final day of CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee meeting that happened in Florida. I haven't watched any of it because I'm going to watch it all between now and Wednesday. And I'm going to do I'll record the podcast on Wednesday and I'll give you my take. That's going to be all CPAC. I'm going to go over everything. Obviously Trump's speech. I'll focus a little bit on two people that I thought were the biggest deal. Governor Ron DeSantis and Governor Kristi Noem, Florida and South Dakota, respectively. So I'm going to really focus on them. If anybody else kind of stands out as somebody I think, hey, keep an eye on this person, I'll talk about them as well. But it's going to be all CPAC on my next show. But these last 5 weeks for Joe Biden, he's been awful. I mean, he didn't even tell Kamala Harris about the airstrikes. How pathetic is that?